We can't do a thing to staunch to flow of jobs offshore and alleviate the suffering of out-of-work Americans, but we can hand $700 billion over to a guy who, until 2 years ago, ran the main problem-creating company, Goldman Sachs. We can't afford to properly educate our children to fit into a changing America, but we can't afford $1 trillion for a war that Cheney and Bush knowingly lied us into. Ben Bernanke, head of the Federal Reserve, recently was quoted as admitting, "We have lost control. We cannot stabilize the dollar." Now listen to that quote again. Consider how much Bernanke has lied to us, and then imagine just how bad is the real truth. During the past 4 years, and please let this one sink in, the Federal Reserve Bank has created $4 trillion out of nothing, printed out of thin air, and every dollar created in this way dilutes the purchasing power of every dollar already in existence. The recent run-up in the dollar index from 71 to 80 was stupidly transparent, an obvious sham and machination of these guys who have created the very problems which they now demand so much more money in order to solve. And Brian, what's your thoughts on this bailout? You want to put your 2 cents in?
One interesting fact I just saw yesterday, Federal Reserve data itself showed on Thursday that the total amount banks borrowed nearly quadrupled the previous record of $47.9 billion per day, notched up just last week. That's $188 billion every day. So that in itself in a week's time has already equaled $940 billion, which of course greatly exceeds even the bailout itself. In 1 week, that is how much money our nation's banks have had to borrow just to stay an inch above water. So what is the bailout even going to do if it is passed?
If they do pass it, I think that it's fair to say that it's just a band-aid for the inevitable, because in the history of the world there has been no currency that's been able to sustain itself backed by nothing, and we have been off the gold standard since 1971. Many leading economists have been predicting this. Congressman Ron Paul, we went and listened to him last December. He plainly just stated exactly what has happened was going to happen. I mean, just prophesied it, and everyone gave him no credibility at all. You know, if you watched the election process, you saw how he was treated. But once again, we're going to our phone calls early. We had a little problem getting in touch with our guests. So 336-998-9375, and you should still be able to use the 704-873-1400 number if you'd like to call in. Our question today is, are you for the bailout or are you against the bailout? And what does this mean to you? How's this economic situation affecting you now? And also, as a second question, I would like to get people's opinion on this gas shortage. Now, I don't know how much you've seen of it here in Davie County, but in Iredell County, Highway 21, the last 3 or 4 days, I guess it started 2 days ago, gas pumps with the bags on them, no gas anywhere. It just continually got worse. I've not yet heard a good explanation for this, why this is happening, but of course if you watch your local news, you've seen what's happening in Charlotte. People sleeping in their cars. We're being indoctrinated to accept as normal that huge gas fluctuations are normal. We got a call from one of our listeners. Hey, you're on the Real News? Yes, sir.
I've got a background of 25 years as a manager of a commercial bank. I'd like to give a light explanation to our listeners as to what stock investments and direct deposit investments really are. Most people don't know.
Will you go ahead? We don't have our guest, so we got a few extra minutes, so take your time and tell us what's on your mind.
Okay. I'm going to illustrate it this way. Stock investments. A young man got $25,000 and he wants to start his own business, but he needs $100,000 to buy his equipment and get set up to build camper truck covers. He issues stock and puts his stock on the market for people to buy stock. And whenever he sells enough, he gets his $75,000, he cuts it off. Investors has confidence in him. They buy his stock because they believe it will give them a dividend. His assets will increase. Somewhere down the line, they can put their stock on the market and reap a big makeup on it. But theoretically, let's say this man went bankrupt for various reasons. His business would go into a receiver. The receiver would sell off his assets, pay his debts first. Then whatever was left would be divided proportionately to the stockholders. And if it was not enough, and usually it's by far not enough, to pay off the stocks, what the people invested in it, they lose that money. Now, the second way is direct deposits. A family works a week, they get their paycheck, they got $100 over, they think they won't need, they take it to a bank or some other financial institution, they put it in a passbook or a CD on interest drawing. Now, the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Company, years ago, set up a guarantee for the depositors. And I understand they've got about $50 million in it. But if there would become a general meltdown and a run on the bankers, when the Federal Deposit went bankrupt, the federal government would either have to bail the depositors out, or the depositors would lose the money that they put in the bank.
And now, Mr. Anderson, we just saw that the FDIC is seeking an additional $400 billion just to shore itself up. We've also seen them hire an additional 40 people in which their specialty is, in fact, the bankruptcy of large banks. What do you think about that?
Well, that money would supposedly, and you never know how that bunch of crooks in Washington is going to use it. That's the bad part. But if it goes to shore up the depositors that has put their savings in a commercial bank, theoretically, then that is at least some guarantee. But now, getting to this bailout. This bailout is nothing more than a big bunch of rich congressmen who's got big buddies in these bellied-up institutions. They want to make the taxpayers pay these people off so that they won't lose money on their stock investments. And if this big $700 billion is passed, the stockholders and the board of directors and the big wheels in these big companies that's bellied up, they're going to come out of it smelling like a rose at taxpayers' expenses.
And of course, we have the revolving door in and out of the private-public sector. We have Secretary Paulson coming directly from Goldman Sachs, one of the primary orchestrators of this entire fiasco. In fact, the bailout wasn't even proposed till Goldman itself became vulnerable to fall just like Lehman and Bear Stearns did.
Let me ask you something, coming from a banking background, had you yourself saw this coming, or was this a surprise to you that we had this economic meltdown?
No, it was not a surprise to me, because in one of the institutions that I was a loan officer for and a branch manager, we took boxes and boxes of loans that we had made in Davie County and Forsyth County. We took them to Washington and sold them to Fannie Mae. That was years ago. But no, I'm not surprised at what has happened, because we've got a bunch of selfish, greedy idiots in Washington that is ruling us. And there was an economist on TV a few days ago, and this is what that man said.